Welcome, all you happy crumpin' wargamers. This is going to be the final tournament review of Ninth Edition. This was a stacked event. I believe we had maybe 6 of the members of our WTC team at this tournament, so we were all out for each other's blood. We wanted everyone to have a good time, but we also wanted everyone crushed beneath our heels. So this was actually a pretty awesome tournament. We had a total blast. We did use the WTC terrain layout at the tournament. And shout out to all the guys at Obliteration for hosting it. Thank you all. So what we're going to do is I'll talk to you about my list. I'll talk to you about all of my opponents' list. And there's a lot to talk about. There's some real tactical blunders that were made by people that everyone here is going to learn a lot from. And there are also some really, really interesting other little tidbits to lay out. So let's start into it. The first mission that we played was actually the Abandoned Sanctuary. So I want to show you what the terrain layout was real fast. This was the terrain layout. So when we're looking at the screen, you can see that there was 5 missions, or 5 objectives, Abandoned Sanctuaries. And what Abandoned Sanctuaries does is you cannot use forward deploy in No Man's Land. You cannot use redeploys to go into No Man's Land, and you cannot do any pre-game moves, so scout moves into No Man's Land. It's a terrible garbage mission. Everyone hates it, and it really screws things up, but it is the first mission. This was the mission that made me second think my choice to bring the orcs. So I was actually strongly considering bringing my Custodes to this tournament, However, every other mission for the tournament was actually really good for the orcs. So what I did is because I really wanted to win, I was just going to roll the dice, and if I can get my orcs through the first mission, I had a good chance of winning. So that's what I did. I decided, sorry, Custodes, I love you, but I'm taking the orcs to this GT. So first mission was Abandoned Sanctuaries. The problem with WTC Standard here, which I love WTC, I do believe it's the best terrain format that is standardized out there. But you see how there's these double blocks of forest here, because it's not a single forest, those are 2 forests. Moving through that is -4 to move. It is a huge headache, and it's very biased against melee armies on this particular map. However, there are a lot of dense terrains, because basically everywhere you get, you're going to be dense. So I don't know if it's actually even, but it's not too bad. If you're not familiar with WTC terrain, these little vents that you see here, they are both light cover and dense cover, not difficult cover, or not difficult terrain. So these are light and dense. Everything else is just the forests are difficult and dense. These big brown blocks are forests. Sorry if I didn't specify. And then everything else are ruins. And so ruins are always going to be obscuring. So that is the terrain layout. Now let's talk about the list. Let me talk to you about my list first, actually. So this is the list that I decided to bring. My army. I brought a war boss with a Brutal But Cunning and the Killer Claw. He had an attack squig. This dude smacks really hard. I needed someone with damage 3 because you're always going to run into that tricky damage reduction, something that you have to be able to kill, and the war boss can kill anything. Then I brought my beast boss because he's my favorite freaking model in the entire game, and mostly he was a total Chad, but he did fail me once, and we'll talk about that later. So he had proper killie and the beast-side mantle. So that actually bringing him to AP 3 on his beast chopper was a really big deal, and bringing him to AP 4 on his squig was a massive deal multiple times, because it just goes straight through everyone's armor. So with the proper killie is pretty good, and the beast-side mantle makes him very hard to kill, giving him that 5 Feel No Pain and the -1 damage. Boss Zagstruck, because Boss Zagstruck is a total boss, and he just assassinates units, and we love him with how fast and how hard he hits. Then I always bring the Weird Boy with the jump and the warpath. Some people don't understand, they don't agree with my opinion, with my desire to always bring the Weird Boy. The Weird Boy's job is to be my backup plan. The Weird Boy exists for when things go wrong. I don't actually bring him to serve a primary purpose. I guess you could say his primary purpose is going to be casting Warpath out there and just maybe boosting some of my units. But he's not really that valuable for the points cost. However, he is the most valuable part of my army because when things go awry or wrong, him casting the jump to get me into position keeps me in the game when otherwise I would have been destroyed. So the Weird Boy is essential to the orcs, at least in 9th edition. We'll see what happens in 10th. For troops, and this was a deviation for me, but I really like this deviation, and I'm going to keep it. I brought 2 units of Beast Nagas. I was only bringing the 1. The 2 units made a massive freaking difference for me, and I will not go back. I loved having those Beast Snaggers just to get around and mix it up and just mess things up and steal objectives. So freaking powerful. The way I did it is I ran one Beast Snagget in my kill rig and the other Beast Snagget inside my battle wagon, and I was able to just plow up the field, and I can get OBSEC anywhere, and those guys can just annihilate people. So I will always keep the 2 Beast Snaggers, at least for the rest of the ninth, which I guess I'm not doing another tournament, so take that for what it is. Then I brought 1 unit of Truck Boys, and I have maintained from day one that the Goths can't take Truck Knobs. They have to have Truck Boys because the Goths must have as much OBSEC as possible because we don't have much OBSEC. So this gives me 3 OBSEC units, which I was honestly felt kind of spoiled with in the Goths. So I have 2 units of Beast Snaggers, 1 Truck Boys, a lot of killing from those things. Tank Buster Bombs came in clutch several times. I'll talk about that when we get to the matchups. So much utility, loved it. And then 3 units of Gretchen for doing the good bits, basically. Then my elites, I had 2 units of Commandos. I always played with 2 units of Commandos. That way you can lock enemies in the deployment zones. You can outplay people in the pregame. They're so important. And then I had 1 unit of Knobs. There were 5 Claws and 2 Big Choppas in it. I would have had more, but I just didn't have the points for it. And honestly, that unit was enough to kill most things anyway. So I was generally pretty happy. They would ride in the battle wagon with my War Boss and a unit of Beast Snaggers. Or with Boss Zagstruck and a unit of Beast Snaggers, depending on what mission it was. Then in Fast Attack, we had the Squighog Boys. Always bring the Squighog Boys. They're so powerful. They're great targets for to jump. They're great targets for strat reserves. Love them, love them, love them. Then I had 2, and this was actually new for me as well. I went with 2 9-man squads of Storm Boys, and I brought the Power Claw on them. I didn't bring 10-mans because you don't need 10-mans. What does a 10-man give you that 9 doesn't? Well, it gives you access to Green Tide for 1 turn. And I don't take Green Tide, so I go with 9-mans. And I just use that 1 Storm Boy I dropped to pay for the Power Claw I put on the knob. Then I have 1 5-mana Storm Boy, and that 1 5-mana Storm Boy is the one who always starts in Deep Strike, and they're the ones who just drop down where I need them, where the 2 9-mans pretty much always start on the board or inside the Battle Wagon. Then for my heaviest support, I brought the Battle Wagon. He was decked out to the 9s. He had the Fortress, so the 5 of Field or 5 of Invuln. He had the Ard Case to bring up to T8, and he had the Death Roller for the Weapon Skill 2 and that sweet, sweet damage 2. He's a beast. I love him. That T8, oh my gosh. Going from T7 to T8 made a world of difference so many times in this game. There were so many times that I was getting shot with Meltas or I was getting shot with Plasma or whatever, and him having to wound me on 4s instead of 3s kept me in the game. So I loved that Ard Case. Then I brought the Kill Rig. He had the Frazzle spell and the Squiggly Curse, also both awesome with Squake High Tires. You must have Squake High Tires because it adds 1 to the movement and 2 to the advanced rolls. Makes them super fast, gives them a 33-inch threat range on turn 1 if you wah. And then 1 unit of 3 Killicons with Big Shooters. I was running the 5-man with Rockets. I actually think I prefer the 3-man with Big Shooters. It makes them super good for being a strat reserve defender. It makes them a much better utility piece. And it's just not nearly as much of a point sink. Now, I still like the 5-man with the Rockets. I just kept personally finding that so many times I would only get to shoot once with the Rockets because they're blast and they don't shoot in melee. And I typically don't bring them in until turn 3 anyway, so those points just weren't worth it. So I just dropped it to that 3-man with the Big Shooters. They were awesome. And then lastly, I had the Runt Herd for the Runt Herd tricks. So overall, I gave up 19 points on Assassinate. I gave up 11 on Bring It Down and 14 on No Prisoners, and then 6 on Abhor the Witch. The reason why I don't care about giving a 19 on Assassinate, because people are always like, oh, you give up 19 on Assassinate. Well, yeah, I do, but I don't care. What it does is it frees me up. It gives me the authority to use my characters however the heck I want. When I know my opponent's going to get 15 points on Assassinate, I don't care about denying it anymore. And I can be as aggressive or as reckless as I want with my characters. It's very freeing. It gives me the ability to just play the freaking game. It gives me the ability to risk certain things that I wouldn't be able to risk if I was trying super hard to deny the points. So I don't care about giving up 19 points. I really don't. No Prisoners, I would like to be able to drop that down to 12, I think, but I don't really know how I would do that, so it is what it is. All right, guys, that is my list. It played pretty simply. Typically, I'd have Snaggers, Knobs, and a War Boss or Zagstruck in the truck, or in the Battle Wagon. One time I did have the Storm Boys in the Battle Wagon, but we'll talk about that when we get there. Let's move on into the very first matchup. First matchup was Abandoned Sanctuaries. No deployment in No Man's Land, right? So I already showed you the terrain for this. I was against the Iron Hands. This was actually a fairly, I I was a little bit worried here because typically I have my commandos ready to go up and just tag things so they can't shoot me, but I didn't have that. So I knew he was going to have a shooting phase just to blast me. And if you look at this list, there is a lot of blasting in there. He ran the character Dreadnought. If you guys don't know about this character Dreadnought, it is a nightmare. It is the scariest freaking thing in the game. It can and will kill everything. Iron Hands have a specific stratagem a lot of people don't know about that lets them cause 6s to wound count as 2 wounds. That's bad. That's real bad, especially when you're hitting with like D6 damage weapons and stuff. So it's really nasty. So he brought the Tech Marine. The Tech Marine had the Warlord trait to give any unit 1 reroll to hit, 1 reroll to wound, 1 reroll damage roll. He had the Lieutenant for reroll 1s to wound, and then he had the character Dreadnought for annihilating everything. The character Dreadnought had the exploding 6s Warlord trait. Then he had 1 unit of Incursors, 1 unit of Infiltrators. The Infiltrators were there to screen out, obviously. 2 Redemptors, 1 with the Macroplasma, 1 with the Onslaught. 1 Land Speeder Tornado, it had the Melta on it. And then lastly, he went with 2 units of Desolation Marines, 2 Devastators with Multi-Meltas, 2 units of Eradicators, and he had that drop pod. The way that, and now I did end up taking the win, so it was 100 to 51, and here's why I took this win. It's very, very simple. I'm going to actually go back to that picture so you can see the train here. Turn 1, he first turn, he shot everything, and he obliterated my kill rig. Just bye-bye, kill rig gone. Then he made a really big error, and this is probably because I don't think he's played on this level before, but he was a good player. I did enjoy playing with him. But he dropped his drop pod right in the middle. So right in that middle objective in light cover or in the vent, he dropped it and he let out 2 units of multi-melter devastators and just hit my army really, really hard with them. But then he gave me the option to tag his drop pod. If you guys don't know how this works, basically, a drop pod can't fall back from combat. So what I was able to do is I was able to basically tag my entire army into his drop pod in my turn 1, which means he can't shoot me because you can't shoot into combat. So what I would do is I would take my characters, I would put them within 3 inches of the drop pod so that they could heroic intervene in the drop pod in my opponent's turn. I tagged my knobs as I put them as far up the battlefield as I could. I used a charge to get them super far up the battlefield. And then I had 1 knob within engagement range of the drop pod. So then the whole unit was engaged. So he couldn't shoot my unit at all. And he had no real melee because his list was just shooting. So he didn't want to charge my knobs. And then I had my Storm Boys run up there as well. My Storm Boys would just tag it with just 1 Storm Boy. And that 1 knob, I had him just use his Choppa so he couldn't kill drop pod. Then in his turn, that's when I piled everything in. I heroic intervened, killed his drop pod, and then declared the WA. And at that point, he had no chance because it was a complete tabling. It was a wipe. So drop pods are really useful because they can drop down turn 1. And yes, I know there's arguments. Can they do it on Abandoned Sanctuaries? It was ruled here that they can. I actually think they can as well. But that was an error. If you're a person who uses drop pods, I highly recommend sometimes considering dropping them turn 2. The thing I always remind myself, guys, is you don't have to win the game in turn 1. You can win in turn 5. It's okay to win in turn 5. So let's go to the next matchup. Oh, sorry. Also, it was 100 to 51. I chose get the good bits behind enemy lines and stomp them good. All right. What was my rationale? Let's do my rationale real fast. Get the good bits. I'm always going to take no matter what. Behind enemy lines, he had 1 unit of infiltrators. But I wasn't really that worried because I knew I was just moving directly towards him, and if I didn't get to him, I was going to lose anyway. So I just chose behind enemy lines as a win more or less. And then stomp him good. He had no melee threat, so he was never going to kill me melee anyway. So stomp him good was essentially just guaranteed. So that's why I chose this. Next matchup, let's talk about round 2. This was conversion, and conversion is when you get 2 points for holding objectives, 4 points for holding your opponent's objective, and -1 point for not holding your own. All right, so this was against my buddy Shetil. Shetil is one of my main teachers, actually, and he's one of the best players. I think he's actually the best player I've ever played against. He's really, really, really talented at the game, and he teaches me a ton. I was very terrified going into him in this matchup because he has a very hard-hitting Imperial Guard list. I did get lucky here, and I went first, and that's why the result of this match was the way it was. If he had went first, it probably would have been the exact opposite, to be honest with you. So let me show you the terrain for conversion. So this is the terrain for conversion. Can I scroll here? Yeah. All right, sorry. My screen share thing's not letting me show you the terrain layouts. How can I fix that? You know what? Can I just copy this image? No. All right. Sorry. Can't see the terrain layout. Anyway, it wasn't bad. It was pretty good terrain layout. There were forests on the sides. There were 2 obscuring in the middle, and then we had the dense and the light cover events in the middle as well. But it was a good quality terrain. Basically, on a conversion, it's a close deployment because you have that one circle of 9 inches in the middle where no one can deploy. I put my commandos right there. I put my commandos on another flank to get the good bits. I started my Storm Boys and Zagstruck inside the battle wagon. The reason why I did that is turn 1, I called the wah, and they all moved 21 inches up the battlefield, and they were able to engage and just slaughter all of his troops, and I was able to tag all of his vehicles. I was able to tag his tank commander, and I had Boss Zagstruck engage with the tank commander, but I had my Storm Boys actually physically touching the tank commander, so in his shooting phase, he couldn't target Boss Zagstruck. It was very, very well done. I'm actually pretty proud of the way I did that. And essentially, I was tabled in turn 5, but, I mean, we never left his table. I mean, he didn't get out of his deployment zone until turn 5. So at that point, I had already maxed my score, and there was just no chance. The Goff pressure list essentially did what the Goff pressure list was made to do, and that was awesome. So he had his list was pretty simple. He had pretty standard. He had a few subtle intricacies in it. So he had the Cadian Command Squad. He actually didn't bring the banner of Piss Off, the finial of the Necrodemish. So what he actually took is he took the Desert Eagle weapon or whatever. And so they had double exploding 6s to hit, the command squad did, or the commander did. And then it was all like strength 6, AP 3, damage 2. And the Ogren was doing the same thing. So it actually hit crazy hard. And I kind of like it, actually. It's a very difficult thing to kill, because whenever the Ogren does finally die, he just resurrects it the next turn anyway. So a lot of times that command squad is actually is one of the big tankiest things in the entire game. People aren't ready for that. He had the 2 Kachkin, one with the teleport and one with the get out of the Torx after it moves thing. And he had the Rough Riders. Rough Riders are total animals. They're so strong. They're just also very, very glass cannon-y, but I love them a lot. Yeah, so that's the story of this list. Goff pressure list went first, and I just stuffed him. If I had gone second, honestly, he probably would have just shot me off the table, and I would have had no chance. So I just kind of got a little bit lucky here. But it was a good game, and I really appreciated Shuttle's time. And then we go into round 3. So as of right now, I'm 2-0. Now we go to round 3. This was the other list at the tournament that I didn't want to play, because I know this guy. This guy is an amazing player. He's actually the vice captain of our Team Norway. He is super incredible player, and I was very grateful to get the opportunity to play with him. This was probably one of the best games I've ever had. It was an absolute blast. This was the Scouring, and in the Scouring you have to do a action in No Man's Land, right? Which all the objectives are in No Man's Land. And if this is a hard list to play. So it's Tau. He's got 2 Cadre Fireblades. Their entire purpose is they give exploding 6s to shoot to all the breachers. He's got a Cold Star Battlesuit with Precision on the Hunter and Super Flamer. The Precision on the Hunter lets him reroll all hit and wound rolls. And then he goes 90 Breachers and 9 Devilfish. If you guys don't know how this list works, you probably don't, because not many people are running it. If you choose Mont-Ka, which is the Tau discipline, or they can do Mont-Ka or Ka, don't worry about it. They all get to pregame move 9 inches. So he pregames moves 9 Devilfishes up 9 inches. And then in his turn, they fly up. They're 12 inches or 14 inches or something like that. For 1 CP, 3 of them can let the breachers get out after they move. So he moves 30 inches turn 1. He has all this OBSEC, and he's got about 300 shots that are going to be hitting on 3s, re-rolling 1s, exploding on 6s. Doesn't matter that they're only damage 1. It will just annihilate. So the way that you try to have to play against it is that you have to drop your infiltrators or your forward deployers to deny that pre-game move. The problem is he got the first drop. So he got to drop first. He dropped his stealth suits in the best position for him, which was very intelligent. Then I put my commandos to block him out on the other side of the field as best as I possibly could. And then after we had deployed, it was very simple. One of us was going to go first. He went first. So he was able to fly over, grab complete board control, and stuff me. Now, I did hit back way harder than I think either one of us expected, and the game was super tight. It was down to the absolute wire. I made one mistake that I remember, and he made one mistake that I remember. That mistake that I made is I didn't have my character in a position to heroic intervene like I should have, and the mistake that he made is he dropped his vehicle in a place for my character to heroically intervene when he shouldn't have. So it was just an incredible back and forth game. The dice rolls were honestly pretty freaking even. Both of us had some wild swings. This was an awesome match. I greatly appreciate it. And we both agreed that if I go first, it's kind of the exact opposite. So I just stuff him, but in this case, he got to stuff me. So that sounded weird, but anyway. But yeah, so it ended up 73 for me, 78 for Mr. Rasmus. Rasmus is an amazing player. I think he's like the number 10 Tau player in the world, and I certainly don't feel bad losing to him. He played an amazing game, and he earned it. And I'm a little salty because I didn't win because he beat me, so that's why I lost the tournament. But anyway, he's awesome, and I greatly appreciate it. So let's go on to that last match, or the next two matches. So these matches were both against Death Guard, actually. The first one was against Tide of Conviction. My opponent here was great. He was really new to the game, but he played really well. It was super awesome. Maybe I might be a little bit ashamed here, but so this kid was it was a young man, and he was super new to the game, but he had a really firm grasp on it. So I was playing it as a coaching match because I kind of figured I was going to win, because he had just overperformed in some matchups. And so I was coaching him. I was helping him fix some mistakes he was making as we were playing. And then when we were in the fourth round, it was really close. And I was like, oh, crap, I might lose this. So I might maybe slightly ashamed of this, but I actually stopped coaching him for a round to kind of hope that he made the mistakes so that I could get my win. And maybe it's a little slimy of me, but it was a good game. I was really impressed with the young man, and I think we had a great time. And that was the matchup. So it was 90-71. He denied me some primary, which he did a good job of, and that's why I only scored 90 there. But it was pretty awesome, man. Pretty good game. Super enjoyed it. And then lastly, we went into the final matchup of the day, or of the weekend. This was Death and Zeal. Death and Zeal is score 2 points for taking an objective you didn't previously hold, and it's also score another 1 point if you kill an enemy off of the objective. So if you do both, you get 3. If you do one of those, you get 2. So this was against a slightly different Death Guard list. This one, he ran the Demon Prince, who had reroll hit and wound rolls. Then he ran 3 5-man Plague Marines, and then he ran a 10-man Pox, a 13 Pox, 3 individual Bloat Drones, 3 individual Mephitic Plague Crawlers, 2 Plague Burst Crawlers, and Mortarion. I learned a valuable lesson in this matchup. I will never again Bring It Down against Death Guard. Killing Death Guard vehicles is a total nightmare. Those things do not die. The -1 damage, the Blight Haulers are -1 to hit in melee. T8, T7, they don't die. I'm never taking Bring It Down again. I thought it was a good choice because he gave up 15 on it. This was kind of a repeat of the Imperial Guard game I had. I went first, and I was just able to stuff him in his deployment zone. My poor Beast Boss, he did have he had just a whiff of game. I think he killed 1 model in this game, and he was engaged in 3 fight phases. So he just completely whiffed in this matchup. But he gave me a lot of utility, and I really appreciated him. I never killed Mortarion here. Eventually, the game kind of went down to where I had killed most of the things, and he had 2 Mephitic Plague Crawlers, or whatever. I don't know. Whatever they're. Mephitic Blight Haulers. I don't remember what they're called. The little things that aren't the big indirect cannons. But 2 of them were alive, and Mortarion was alive. I was never going to kill him. But that was okay because it was a good game, and I was able to edge it out. So I ended up taking second overall in the tournament. It was an awesome tournament. We had a total blast. Mr. Rasmus, the guy who was playing the Tau, took first, as well he deserved to. Team Norway did a good showing. We had 4 of the top 5 placements there, and I think it was a total blast. The things that I learned about my list, honestly, I kind of freaking loved my list. I'm a really big fan for where it was. I do regret not taking Gaz. I think Gazcool would have been great here. I was a little bit worried about taking him just because of the way the terrain was laid out. if I had to do that tournament again, I would take Gaz. And that means I would drop the War Boss, which would drop 100 plus points, and it would get me an extra CP. But then I would have to find out where the other 200 points were coming from, which means I was going to drop the Squighog Boys, and I was going to drop the Killicons, and probably an upgrade on the battle. I would drop Ard Case on the Battle Wagon, and that would have paid for him. I think that would have been totally fine. And I think running this again, that's exactly what I would do. So this was a great tournament, great experience, great last experience for 9th edition. And I'm really, really looking forward to 10th edition, where we can go over everything in super detail. Remember, guys, I'm going to build a complete course from day one for every single step of 10th edition Warhammer 40,000. And we are going to master this game together, and we're going to become the best there ever was. I'm not going to sing the Pokemon theme song right now, though, because although I kind of want to. Anyway, thanks all my Happy Crumpin' Wargamers. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them down below. I would love it if you would just give me a little like and give me a subscribe, because I do work hard on these videos, bringing you guys lots of information. And until next time, crump on, everybody.